There's a misconception that lesbian means a woman who loves other women, and actually the definition is non-men who are attracted to and love other non-men. Throughout history, there have always been gender non-conforming lesbians, and it's interesting to see nowadays that there are some folks who kind of try to gatekeep that identity and only include folks who identify as women, when that's not what being lesbian is all about. There are trans men who identified as a lesbian for many, many years and still feel comfortable within that community and that identity. There are non-binary folks of all kinds who identify as lesbians. There's like a zillion different ways to be a lesbian. And if that word is what's comfortable for you, then nobody can gatekeep it from you. I am non-binary, transmasculine, and I'm a lesbian.
What is a lesbian? Most people know the answer: a female homosexual or a woman who is exclusively attracted to other women. The word originates from the Greek poet Sappho, who lived on the island of Lesbos, with the word in use from as far back as the late 1800s. However, in recent years, the term's definition has been the subject of a stretching out of shape, a loosening of boundaries meant to allow the word to represent anyone who wishes to be represented by it, instead of as a word representative of a specific sexuality. This has occurred in conjunction with the loosening of the word woman to refer not to biological sex, but to gender identity, which is subject to change at the whims of whoever chooses to participate within it. Gender ideology states that gender, the expectations and traits ascribed to one because of their sex, can be chosen instead of passively inflicted due to one's biological sex, and in turn, that gender does not have to be linked to any specific sex. It is treated more like a descriptor of aesthetics and personality rather than an observation of how society treats and rears individuals to act as the result of their sex. Of course, doing so means that homosexuality and gender ideology cannot coexist, as it redefines homosexuality as referring to same-gender attraction instead of same-sex attraction.
Keep the lights on.
You see, this type of shit right here is why I say cis lesbians are TERFs. Oh, Saoirse, they weren't talking about natural strap. Think for fucking 5 seconds. What would be the reasons that you don't want one that's flesh-colored? I read through the comments on that video and they made me fucking sick. The flesh-colored ones traumatize me. They look too much like the real thing. Lesbians in your community have the real thing. That girl at the end of the bar has the real thing. And you're gonna be just the type of girl who thinks that she's all that when you haul her ass until you learn that she has the real thing. It's just a video about strap-ons. Don't make it a big deal. They probably weren't even thinking about trans people. Us not coming into your consideration is transphobia. So I'm glad y'all are having fun making your cute little videos. But frankly, I'm a little tired of being part of a community where I consistently see comment sections that are pages and pages describing exactly how and why bodies like mine are disgusting. I eat, breathe, and sleep as a lesbian, and I, every bit as much as you, deserve to feel a part of this community and not feel like my body is disgusting. You might think I'm being dramatic, but this just really hits on my lived experience. In the past 3 weeks, I, in no uncertain terms, have been ghosted for being trans 4 times. Cis lesbians, you gotta fucking do better. You're starting to look like the cis gay men. And honestly, I think it's worse because you were supposed to understand misogyny.
Homosexuality occurs in many animal species and is a normal deviation of human behavior. That transgenderism only occurs in humans lends credence to the understanding that it's a social phenomenon instead of a biological one. Only human beings have societies wherein religion, cultural influence, and prejudices have created strict roles and behaviors ascribed unnaturally to people based on their sex, which in turn results in discomfort when those artificially prescribed roles do not fit individual behavior or desires. Because homosexuality refers to attraction to the same sex, it serves as the ultimate validation for those who wish to change their sex. While many will go along with respecting pronoun choices, dating is the hard line that illustrates just how hollow those words of validation really are. As a result, many trans individuals view dating and sex as the final frontier of transition, to the point of calling this barrier the cotton ceiling.
Confused about that too, and for those of you that are still confused, it's in reference to this little purple button right here, made by a company that Joe Rowling definitely supports. So I went to the only viable source for definitions for stuff like this, and here you go, that's what it is. So it's basically just saying, talking about the struggles that a trans woman who happens to be a lesbian, or trans men who happen to be gay, might find some difficulty in a dating pool, because transphobic people in the community still are like, you're not real men, you're not real women. And they're like, but I only like women, I would never date a trans woman. I only like men, I would never date a trans man. It's that. I don't know how that concept is equal to this, but sure, Joe.
A moniker which refers both to the female cotton underwear and to the glass ceiling, which prevents women from rising higher in the workplace, and is often called to be shattered. This namesake brings to question how the cotton ceiling might be breached with force, and with force, both physical and social, it has been. Homosexual women serve as the ultimate validation that the world views you as the sex you wish to be, rather than the sex you are, even, and especially if, you have not completed acts of transitioning to be a better facsimile of the gender that you identify as. All lesbian spaces have been invaded by men who identify as women. Lesbian bars around the country are shutting down as what was previously a safe space for homosexual women has been pressured into becoming all-gendered. Dating apps especially are difficult to traverse as a gay woman, as any attempt at asserting personal boundaries, such as having female-only spaces, or noting that one is only attracted to female people, is construed to be transphobia.
Not all lesbians have a uterus. That's why, okay? Not all lesbians have the body parts you think they have. So when you make statements about the lesbian experience, you need to use inclusive language, okay?
Because lesbians are homosexual women, two categories of people who are disliked and oppressed by gender ideology, lesbians have been treated as if synonymous with TERF. The term itself was created in 2008 by Viv Smith, a self-described cis-het woman who ran a feminist blog where, on August 17, 2008, Smith wrote a blog post announcing TERFs, the first use of the term, in regards to the internet discussions on gender identity going on amongst other feminist bloggers, where she wrote, "I am aware that this decision is likely to affront some trans exclusionary radical feminists, but it must be said. Marginalizing trans women at actual risk from regularly documented abuse/violence in favor of protecting hypothetical cis women from purely hypothetical abuse/violence from trans women and women-only safe spaces strikes me as horribly unethical as well as repentantly callous." She later compared TERFs to racists by stating, "Much of the factional divide here comes down to yet another gatekeeping argument about purity and feminism, perennial since the women's suffrage movement, and this one has uncomfortable echoes of Elizabeth Cady Stanton's arguments against extending voting rights to black men." The concept of lesbian separatism being equivalent to racism and fascism in part stems from the proliferation of the term TERF by Smith. With lesbian and TERF often being used interchangeably, even spaces which are earmarked for same-sex women are rife with lesbophobia.
I am so confused. When did I ever say that I was transphobic or didn't like trans women? When was that even talked about? My last post clearly says that lesbians can like a strap-on but not like dick. Which is true. Where did a transphobic and trans woman and trans men come into that conversation? Because I'm confused. Ain't nobody transphobic here. Ain't nobody transphobic. I obviously know that there's trans women, and I obviously know that there's trans men. And nobody here is trying to spread hate. So, make some sense out of this, because...
Particularly offensive is the idea that a group of women who have historically been excluded from feminism on account of respectability politics, a la the Lavender Menace, are exclusionary themselves, which is far from the case. No one would argue that other minority groups, such as racial minorities, are bigoted for wanting a space free of their oppressors in which they can speak and mingle freely. However, while many lesbians are radical feminists, the conflation of lesbian with transphobe has led to the mistreatment of lesbians within the LGBT community, as immutable sexuality is presented as a form of bigotry that must be unlearned. One such example that is especially prominent is Her, a dating app created for lesbians. Over the past few years, the app has become notorious for allowing men to create accounts, as long as they have the right gender identity, and for tweeting sentiments which illustrate that the app is not marketing to lesbians, but rather marketing an app supposedly filled with lesbians to those who would want to prey on them. Male intruders in the lesbian community are nothing new. Occasions such as these have been complained about by lesbians going back as far as the 1920s in Germany. Her social media managers have not only posted jokes suggesting that homosexual women need to learn to love penis, but also to suggest lobotomy as a cure for being homosexual, amongst other offensive statements against lesbians rightfully upset that a dating service geared towards homosexual women prefers instead to cater to everyone but homosexual women. The question arises, why are lesbians disliked so much, particularly within the modern queer community? Quite simply, for the same reasons lesbians have always been disliked. Because we are quite content to live our lives without men, without centering our actions or decisions around men. To live a female-centered life is to object to the patriarchal nature of the world we live in. It is, and will remain, controversial and politicized both by those within and outside the lesbian community as a result of being so far outside the norm. Gender ideology and its view that gender can be chosen instead of being linked to biological sex contradicts the concept of homosexuality and is incompatible with the normalization of homosexuality and the abolishment of homophobia. This contradiction has led to the invasion of lesbian spaces by men who identify as women, leading to the loss of safe spaces for homosexual women, not only in the form of bars and women's festivals, but also in online spaces. Lesbians are disliked within the modern queer community for objecting to the patriarchal nature of the world we live in by living a female-centered life, which is nothing new and will likely never change, just as the sexuality of a lesbian will never change to include male people, regardless of how they identify, or the lesbophobia directed at them as a result of refusing to change.
Hi, I had some stuff I wanted to say about this take, that one right there. So the most unfortunate part about all of this is that this is very clearly something that's been in the community since the dawn of time. Like, people feel this way, it fucking sucks, but now people are just like being open about it. Like, they're just straight up being openly transphobic and okay with that. Like, they're okay with that. I'm gonna be using Adeline's video as an example because I know that there are a lot of people who feel this way, but I feel like hers sums up the consensus of what a lot of people are thinking. Also this, like, you don't get to say, call me a TERF, and then be devoid of any kind of criticism. We're gonna talk about this. Also, apologies in advance for not being as eloquent as I'd like to be. If I say anything wrong, please correct me in the comments. I'd love to talk about this. So first off, to say that AMAB non-binary people don't experience sexism or misogyny is like straight up TERF rhetoric. Like, that's what that is. You can pause to read. I'm just gonna zip through these real quick. Like, this just fucking sucks. Again, just awful. Not to mention, I can't really speak too much on this because I am an incredibly femme-presenting lesbian, but I know for a lot of people who have very complicated relationships with gender, it's a whole thing of like, lesbianism is where the femininity comes from, like that is your connection with femininity, so to disregard that in full is just ridiculous. I also feel like there's a huge disconnect with cis lesbians where it comes down to attraction for a lot of them. So like, whether or not someone qualifies as a lesbian is based in whether or not they are attracted to them. Which is what all of this kind of reads as to me, is there's a lot of like, oh, well, if I saw them in a lesbian bar, I'd hiss at them, like, direct quote. And the thing is, like, if an AMAB non-binary person identifies as a lesbian and you don't want them, that's fine. I don't think they want you either. But to stake their identity on whether or not you find them attractive or whether you would date them is just unbelievably invalidating, and like, I really shouldn't have to elaborate on that. And like, I can't believe this is something I'm having to address, but do I need to get into the blatant disregard for what non-binary means? Like, if you are saying that you will date an AFAB non-binary person as a lesbian, but you refuse to date an AMAB non-binary person as a lesbian, if that's not a preference thing and it's like a straight up identity thing, and you're saying that they can't be a lesbian because of that, like, you don't see either of them as non-binary. You don't see either of them as non-binary, you see them as their gender assigned at birth. Like, do you understand? Do you understand that you are literally, like, those are not the definitions? And I don't think I started the video off this way, but I do want to iterate that, like, I'm not trying to be hateful, I'm not trying to start anything, I'm not trying to attack this person, I'm not trying to send hate to this person. I just feel like this is something that people need to talk about, and it's a little upsetting to me that the entire comment section of that original post and the response were all people agreeing with her, and not a fan. I just don't want, like, young, impressionable lesbians to be saying that kind of stuff and thinking that that's how it is, you know? Okay, I have to go to work now, but I'd love to chat about this more if any of you want to. Thank you so much. Bye!
This, dear viewers, is where we part. And this video is brought to you by the Lesbian Visibility Week, wherein her decided to act like an asshole. I stopped using her probably the same week that I downloaded it because I immediately realized that there weren't a lot of actual women on there, and that the ones who were on there were mostly looking for threesomes. Or they were men. So I wasn't surprised by how they acted. It was more just disappointment in that what we expected to see was more prominent than it could have been. If you guys have any comments, questions, or concerns, let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!